I left the radio yesterday dealing with the angel of the Lord and the angel of the Lord's revelation to the man Jacob. And I dealt with on the program yesterday the desire that God had created in Jacob to leave Laban and to go home. We dealt with this homeward call. We dealt with the heart of man, and I hope that the message yesterday was a blessing. But I want to deal today with Laban's overtaking of Jacob and the events that transpire, the ridiculous attitude of Laban, the wrong of Rachel in stealing her dad's gods, and then the position that Jacob placed himself in to finally, in the last analysis, have the last word. In Genesis 31:20, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. And then 7 days later, verse 25, then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. The night before Laban overtakes Jacob, verse 24, and God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. The untrustworthiness of the man Laban is discovered in verse 28. And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters, thou hast now done foolishly. In so doing, it is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And Jacob answered in verse 31, and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure, thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. Verse 34, now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them, and Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And then in verse 36, finally, Jacob, because of his faithfulness in keeping his tongue and keeping his integrity, was finally able to say in verse number 36, and Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban. And he questioned him and said, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Now, having read those various scriptures that I read in Genesis chapter number 31, I want to deal, as the Lord shall help me in the time we have remaining on the program today, concerning this. We find that Laban pursues after Jacob. When Laban learned that Jacob had stolen away, Jacob had a 3-day head start. It took 7 days for Laban to finally overtake Jacob, who had a three-day beginning. And Laban is now about to unleash, or at least in his mind, he thinks that he is going to unleash all of this pent-up vengeance that he has toward the man Jacob. He regarded Jacob as the man that had spoiled all of his fortunes. And yet when Jacob arrived, Laban was not a wealthy man at all. His sons were sorry and trifling and lazy and of no account. And 20 years later, when Jacob leaves, Laban's sons are still lazy and trifling and of no account. Laban is a much wealthier man now than he was when Jacob arrived, but that doesn't matter. In the mind of Laban, a man persuaded against his will is of the same opinion still. And in the mind of Laban, Laban cannot get over the fact that Jacob, though Laban has more than he ever had, Jacob has more than Laban has. And he has this attitude, Laban has stolen from me my fortune. I've run into men in the business world, and I've been practicing real estate now for 33 years. I'm a licensed real estate broker in South Carolina, and I help support the Bright Spot Hour, just like many of you across the network help support the Bright Spot Hour. But I've run into a certain mentality of men along the way and I would sell a piece of property for them and put $500,000 in their pocket. But they wanted to walk away with $550,000. And they would begrudge me that they had to pay me my fee, when if I had not facilitated the sale, they wouldn't have $500,000. And then they would tell everybody I lost $50,000 on that transaction. No, you gave $125,000 for the property. You walked away with $500,000 in your pocket. That means that you made $375,000 on the transaction after paying all of the expenses and after paying my company. You made $375,000. But they will be bitter over that for 10 years because, number one, they had to pay my company a fee. My company in turn pays me. And then I give to the Bright Spot Hour out of that, and to my church out of that. And they wanted to walk away with $550,000, and we couldn't get there. But we could get to $500,000. And they say, oh, I lost $50,000 on that transaction for the next 10 years. Everybody they talk to, Ben Carper cost me $50,000 on that transaction. They'll never say Ben Carper put $375,000 in my bank account. They'll say, you know, if it hadn't been for him, I'd have made $50,000 more. Now that's exactly the attitude that Laban has toward Jacob. Laban wouldn't have what he has if it had not been for the man Jacob. And yet the attitude of Laban toward Jacob is, he has spoiled me, he has taken away all of my riches, he has left with all of my cattle. No, Laban, you have more cattle now than you ever had. The problem is that Jacob has more cattle than you have right now. And so he has this hostile attitude. But you know, even in this midst of hostility, God always intervenes and makes intercession for his people. The Lord is in heaven now praying for you and praying for me. You know, worldly men are very swift in bringing vengeance. That is the opposite of Almighty God, who is filled with mercy. You know, God is always slow in bringing vengeance and slow in bringing wrath. While man is very quick, man wants vengeance and he wants it now. Man wants to settle the score and he wants to settle it now. I'm certainly glad that the nature of God and the work of God is not like the nature of men and the work of men. And Laban had gone to get a pound of flesh. As far as I'm concerned, Laban had gone to kill Jacob. And he's going to take his 2 daughters and their handmaids, Jacob's 4 wives, and 11 children, and all of the herds and flocks, and going to carry all of that back to Syria. He was well prepared to make widows out of his daughters, to make orphans out of his grandsons, and to steal the cattle that Jacob had bred and raised. And God intervened. God superimposed himself the night before Laban meets with Jacob, and the record is in the Bible. In verse 24, and God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. In the vernacular, the Lord tells Laban, you keep your tongue off my man. You keep your tongue off the man Jacob. God is able to check the wicked desires of the unrighteous and the ungodly. There's no doubt in my mind that God has spared my life down through these years. I'm 60 years old and I've been preaching for 43. And I'm positive that God has spared me from heartache, and God has spared me from difficulty, and God has spared me from the ill intent of some that would have come against me. On the next day, when Laban finally comes to Jacob